Good morning and welcome to this week's LinkedIn Live. And today we're looking at empowering accidental managers. What does an accidental manager actually mean to you? This is something I posted in a poll in recent weeks on LinkedIn. And it's a recent statistic that the Chartered Management Institute have surveyed a number of organizations and ascertained that 82% of managers who enter leadership have never had any form of leadership training. They are known as accidental managers. Maybe you were an accidental manager yourself, or maybe you're in an organization and you look around and you know there are really good people doing good jobs, but they have never had any formal leadership training. And that can mean at times they get unstuck. Often this is because they are technically very competent at the work they do, or maybe they've been in an organization for a number of years, and therefore at that point, it's managers, HR, head of people who sometimes believe that person is now ready to be a leader, but they put them into a leadership role without any formal training. Would you ask an accountant to run your books, manage the management accounting of your organization, if you didn't believe they had the skill set to do it? Would you employ an engineer to design a bridge if they hadn't had the formal training and the skill set in order to design that bridge? Yeah, we all know the answer to that one. And that's the thing. Many years ago, when I joined a large global telecommunications organization, I was so full of excitement. It was my first job. It was my first sort of move into the working world after studying business at university. And I had a manager who was technically really, really competent. But after a year of working for him, I wanted to leave the organization. I was so disillusioned. The team was so disillusioned because he was a micromanager, because he didn't know how to lead. He had never had any formal training. And this is something that we're experiencing as organizations all over the world. We're experiencing quiet quitting and we're experiencing loud quitting. And actually, through starting the journey of training accidental managers, we can begin to eradicate this problem. So that is the accidental management or accidental manager phenomenon. What businesses, the three biggest mistakes that businesses are actually making is they are not doing enough upfront. Some organizations are doing nothing in terms of formal training, absolutely nothing. They just believe that potentially leaders are born. Well, leaders are more often made than they are born. And it's a skill set, it's a toolkit that we can arm our leadership with. And what that means if you do nothing is that when you're in the position where you actually need strong leadership skills, strong, robust, effective leadership skills, you're in a position where you need to be reactive because you haven't armed your leaders. And that means they react, and then you're actually dealing with the problem as well as the leadership that isn't trained to do the job. So what we need to do is start to think about being more proactive about our leadership, because leadership learning is never done. That's a phrase used by Simon Sinek. Leadership learning is never done. It does not matter what stage of the organization you're in, what level of the organization you're in, you can always be developing your leadership skills, because none of us know what's around the corner. We've all been through a lot with COVID. None of us knew that was going to walk in the door, but what we needed at that point was strong leadership. The next problem is ad hoc training. So, these are the kind of one-day wonders where you believe that actually by having one day of leadership training, you're going to transform the leadership in your organization and you're going to maybe improve the culture of your organization. Yes, it's great. Any training is great. But actually, what you need is a leadership program so that leadership skills are drip fed through into your leadership toolbox in a way that you can take them on board and use them effectively at a speed where we are able to take this stuff on. We can't all go to one leadership day and believe at the end of that day we're going to take all those skills away. At the end of a leadership day, we may actually take one thing away from that. And then actually, I'm thinking I've got some questions. I've never had questions before on this. This is very exciting. Hi, Chris. I'll come to your question in a minute. And the final problem that we see a lot of is balanced leadership approach, actually having the focus on teams, the focus on the individual, and the focus on the task. When you don't have a balanced leadership approach, when your leaders aren't trained to approach the team, the task, and the individual, what happens is they tend to focus their efforts in one of those bubbles and the others get forgotten. And that can lead to all sorts of problems. It can lead to misaligned objectives. So teams that, may struggle from achieving the tasks effectively. This also may lead to poor team cohesions, and then, poor team collaboration and engagement, and also stagnant individual growth. And when we have stagnant individual growth, we stop developing strong followers within the organization. Let me just pick up on Chris's question. So Chris has asked, do you think certain sectors are more prone to accidental managers? Financial services, law firms, insurance seem to be particularly prone to this. Actually, it's really interesting. Chris, thank you for your question. I have seen this across all sorts of sectors. So I've seen this in the educational sector. I've seen this in the law sector. Actually, I ran a workshop with law firms recently, and this was a common problem, because we often think about being technically proficient but not being a strong leader. And I believe that leadership skills ought to be trained in right from the very start. So when you join the organization, it starts with self-leadership. Are you resilient? Are you able to develop your partnerships, your relationships? It could just be one-on-one. It doesn't have to be big teams. But if we start at that level, very much like the military, and I know you know that world well, Chris, very much like the military, leadership is trained in from the outset, and it is trained in every single time there is a promotion. So, for example, if you're in a law firm and you're wanting to develop, emerging partners, some of these skills need to be developed right from the outset. So those are skills like giving and receiving feedback. They don't have to be big. When we're talking about leadership, giving and receiving feedback is so critical to strong leadership, but it's something that we need to learn and practice as we develop and grow through an organization. So answering your question, actually, yes, I have seen it in all of these, engineering, manufacturing, and the educational sector. So, and actually the pharmaceutical sector. I think this is a problem that we are seeing across the globe in a number of different sectors. So moving on to, and Chris, if you've got any other questions, just pop them in the chat. So moving on to point 3. So my top tips. Well, firstly, it is about continuous leadership. As I've mentioned already, leadership learning is never done. It is about continuous drip feeding leadership skills to grow your toolkit as a leader. What we don't want is an accidental manager having what I call the magic weekend. That's the weekend where on a Friday, maybe we're a team member, and then on Monday, we've been asked to lead the team. Maybe we've moved into a different team in a different department, but we're just being asked suddenly to lead the team. Imagine what that feels like without having the skill set and the skill base and the fundamentals in order to be that leader on day one. And that is a really tough place. I have actually been in that place. It's a very, very unpleasant place to be. And that can affect stress on yourself. that can affect stress on the team. And actually, that then impacts the balanced leadership approach. So that affects the team, that affects the individual, and it certainly affects achieving the outcome. The other thing that I believe organizations, it's not a surprise, and it's probably not even a tip, but it's actually putting resources behind developing your leadership. If you want a strong, effective, robust business, then resources into achieving what you want to achieve with the business means developing your leadership. It means putting resources, time, effort, energy, and investment, money into developing that leadership. And I think my final point here is actually about transitioning your leadership. I've mentioned this before. This is something the military do very well. Transitioning your leadership from being within the organization as a team member into the leader. When you transition your leadership well, what you also do is develop strong followers. And this is a really interesting concept, the concept of followership. We spend a lot of time talking about leadership, but how much time do we actually spend on followership? What we want in an organization are strong followers, but you can't have strong followers without a good, strong leader. And I'm going to leave you with that point, that message, that what are you actually doing to develop your leadership, but actually to develop strong, effective followers within your organization. We want to step away from accidental managers. We want to move into intentional leadership and intentional followership. That's how your businesses will grow and scale. Thank you for your time this week. I look forward to speaking to you next week on our LinkedIn Live. If you have any further questions, please feel free to send me a message. We are offering at the moment a complimentary leadership audit, 45-minute conversation with myself, and we'll look at how you are approaching your leadership development within your organization. Thank you for your time. Have a great week.